everyone, hope you guys are all doing well and welcome back to my channel. Sometime in 2018 I released a video with a list of podcasts I've absolutely been loving, and this is my updated version. So 2020, a list of podcasts that I've absolutely loved over the past year or even the past 6 months. And these are podcasts that I would say are for those that want to kind of develop a growth mindset. There's sort of a message behind all of these podcasts. They deliver information and you sort of learn as you go along. So let's get right into it. I think it's an amazing time right now as well to listen to podcasts, to keep yourself occupied, to keep yourself feeling like you're in a conversation or you're listening to a conversation, or that there are people around you. I think it's a great thing to listen to and a great thing to incorporate in your everyday routine. So the first one is called Today Explained. And Today Explained is a podcast that's actually an American-based podcast. They're very short. They're between 15 to 20, 25 minutes long, and they explain a topic of today. So for example, if I look at yesterday's one, it was about vaccines. As the past 3 weeks has been just pretty much to do with coronavirus, which is completely understandable because that is what's going on today. But when I was listening to it before all of this happened, every day was a different topic. So the hosts don't just talk about themselves, they actually interview professionals who can give you more information and a better insight. And I find that the 15-20 minutes that I listen to go super fast. So I really enjoy this podcast and I highly recommend it. The next podcast is one called Second Life, and I find that I listen to a lot of podcasts that with male hosts, and I don't know why that is, and I find this is the case with YouTube as well. Tend to watch a lot more males when it comes to learning things than females, and it's a very bizarre phenomenon. It actually is something that researchers found is quite common for people to do, even women, to watch other men and not women. So this one I've been really enjoying, and I also like the fact that the host is a woman. It's called Second Life. Essentially the host interviews a range of different women and talks about their life and their journey. A good episode where she interviewed Kat Von D. I loved listening to it because, you know, we don't necessarily hear the behind the scenes of social media influencers and people that maybe use social media as an initial platform and then bounce into a huge industry and make millions or billions. And I love listening to her story and the challenges that she went through, and all of the episodes are very similar to this. They're quite long, I believe. They're about an hour or so, just under an hour. The next one is called The Knowledge Project, and again I'm just scrolling through to look at the last one I listened to, and this podcast is to do with understanding and learning what people have learned, the mistakes that they've made, and you can learn from their mistakes. We're living in a time now where we can learn from the journey and the experiences of other people, and this is a great podcast to figure out and to learn what other people have already figured out. I like the fact that these interviews are sort of to do with self-help, and I've really been enjoying self-help books recently to do with habit forming and productivity and things like that. And this podcast is essentially, speaking to successful men and women who have gone through this journey and who can give you tips. Now, speaking of podcasts, I have been asked a lot about how to start your own podcast, and for those that don't know, I do have my own podcast. My husband and I have a podcast where we continue conversations and we speak about just things we've spoken about during the week, and carry on conversations that are just to do with life, business, money, finance, family, whatever, things that we just get on with and think about and just chat throughout the week. And a lot of you asked me how to start one and what tools I use and things like that. Skillshare are sponsoring this segment of the video. Skillshare is an online learning community for creatives. They offer thousands of inspiring classes for creative and curious people. It doesn't matter if you are a beginner, if you're a pro, if you just want to try out something new. Friends is a great platform that has classes that can fit your needs in terms of flexibility, but also in terms of different abilities and different levels. And now is the absolute perfect time. We have a lot more time on our hands, a lot more time on our hands. We're all indoors, we're all at home, and it's a great time to learn something new. Most classes are under 60 minutes, so if it's during your lunch break, even if it's before you start work or after you start work, or even on the weekends, we have nothing else to do these days. Right now our routines have been completely obliterated, and personally I found it really hard to stick to a schedule. So knowing that I can fit in something fun, something exciting, something different during the day day. Just helps me plan and structure my day a little bit better, and in a way that kind of takes my mind off of things that are going on at the moment. The first 1,000 subscribers that click on the link in my description bar down below will be getting a free trial for 2 months of the premium Skillshare membership. This includes all the classes that Skillshare offers, and I mean 2 months, hopefully by then you'll be out of quarantine, so you'll be able to really maximize how much you get out of this free membership. And even afterwards, it's only less than $10 a month, which is like, I don't know, £6-7. And as a podcaster myself, I've really been enjoying Podcasting Secrets, How to Start Your Own Podcast by someone called Nicola. I found it really interesting to go through the steps that she's provided, even though I started a podcast a few months ago, almost a year now, and being able to refresh my memory and be able to think about my target audience again, think about my content, think about what it is that I am actually producing when we release podcasts every single week. Really has been really helpful. The next podcast that I've really been enjoying is called How to Fail with Elizabeth Day. So this podcast I find really interesting because it takes a very different stance to the typical podcast that interview people and ask them about their successes. This podcast actually is on the flip side of that and talks about people's failures and how they turn that into a success and how they built upon the things that they learnt through failing and through their failures, and then became successful, or kind of overcame those challenges or those barriers. She's interviewed quite a few different authors, but she's also interviewed singers. Like I recently listened to one where she interviewed Mabel, and I found that super interesting as well, just to see the journey of how people got to where they got to and where they actually failed, because a lot of the time we just hear about the successes and not necessarily the barriers and the failures to get to where they got to. This podcast is called Not Overthinking, and if you are here on YouTube, you probably know of someone called Ali Abdal, and he is a fellow educational YouTuber, content creator, who is also a junior doctor, and he and his brother have a podcast. And again, it's a similar kind of idea where they just discuss things that they've talked about, or concepts, or human behavior, or emotions, or I think the last one I listened to last week was about, or this week even, was about maths. So his brother, Ali Abdal's brother, discussed, I think he has a math degree, or he's a mathematician, and he discussed maths and some mathematical concepts, and I find that I learn something educational every single time, and as a fellow YouTube content creator, I definitely support. The next podcast is called The Tim Ferriss Show. Now, I'm a huge Tim Ferriss fan. I say fan, I mean I read the book 4 Hour Workweek and I absolutely love it, and I'm always dipping back into it again when I want to refresh my mind about certain business acumen things that I should and shouldn't be doing. But I really do enjoy his podcast. Again, they're quite long episodes, which I'm not necessarily a fan of, but I do like the fact that he discusses business, self-help, productivity, and again interviews a range of different people. And yeah, it's just again one of those podcasts that if you are someone who is an intellectual, wants to learn a bit more about yourself, how to embrace your characteristic, how to build upon yourself, how to start a business, I definitely think it's a great podcast. The next podcast is called TED Talks Daily, and again I'm just going to scroll through and just remind myself of what I listened to recently. But TED Talks, I mean we all know what TED Talks are, but this is a daily podcast and they're quite short. I mean they're like 10-15 minutes if that. TED Talks are given by a range of different people with different credentials and different backgrounds, and you always learn something new. And I think for 10 minutes, maybe just getting a coffee or just quickly having some breakfast, 10 minutes and you can learn something new. I highly recommend it, and I always learn something new from TED Talks in general and also their podcasts. And lastly is a podcast called Stuff You Should Know, and again you might have heard this podcast before. Definitely would class it in the educational category of podcast, where again it's a bit like Today Explained, where you learn about a specific topic and just about random things. So just random stuff that you should just know, but you might not know, or you might not know much about. There was one that I listened to about how dog training works, and it was like 50 minutes or so, and how to train your dog. I mean, I don't have a dog and I have no intention of getting one, but I just think it's so interesting because we see dogs all the time, and just to understand how training actually works. It was a history of soda, so it's American based, so the history of like fizzy drinks. It's just random stuff that honestly you wouldn't think to actually go and find out, but by listening to this podcast you can go and you can learn it. You can learn it really quickly by just being entertained and by listening to it whilst, I don't know, doing the dishes or something. But yeah, I really hope that you guys enjoyed my updated list of podcasts. Open to any suggestions for any new podcasts that you guys might have suggestions for that are similar to ones that I have just listed. I hope you guys are all doing well. Please make sure you are staying safe, staying at home, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.